I never thought I'd be afraid of loose change, or car headlights, or the sound of an engine idling in the dark. But after 3 months working the night shift at booth 23 on the Blackwood Turnpike, I've learned that fear can come from the most mundane things. The job seemed perfect when I first saw the listing. Night shift toll operator, no experience required, excellent benefits, $22 per hour. As a college dropout with mounting debt, it felt like a lifeline. The interview was brief, conducted by a pale man in a gray suit who never blinked. Mr. Harrison, the supervisor, seemed more interested in my ability to follow instructions than my qualifications. "The rules are everything," he said, sliding a worn leather-bound handbook across his desk. "Your predecessor departed because he couldn't follow them." The way he emphasized departed made my stomach turn. The handbook looked ancient, its pages yellow and brittle. The first page simply read rules for booth 23 night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. in faded type. Below it, someone had scrawled in shaky handwriting, "For your survival." Training was scheduled with the retiring operator, Tom, on a rainy Tuesday night. He was a gaunt man with dark circles under his eyes, hands trembling as he showed me the ancient computer system and various equipment in the cramped booth. "Listen carefully," Tom whispered, glancing nervously at the empty highway. "This isn't a normal toll booth. After 11 p.m., things change. The rules in that handbook, they're written in blood, literally. Each one costs someone their life to learn." I laughed nervously. "Come on, it's just collecting money from cars." Tom grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. "You think this is a joke? Look at the security cameras." He pointed to the grainy monitors showing the empty highway stretching into darkness. "Watch how the mile markers sometimes move. Notice how the same car might pass through multiple times, but the driver looks different each time. And whatever you do, don't..." A truck horn blared, making us both jump. Tom released my arm, his face ashen. "I've said too much. Read the handbook. Memorize every rule. Your life depends on it." He gathered his things with shaking hands. "One more thing, take this." He pressed a small silver medallion into my palm. "Mr. Harrison will tell you it's company policy to keep it in the booth. The truth is, it's the only thing keeping them out." "Keeping what out?" Tom just shook his head and hurried into the night, leaving me alone in booth 23 with the handbook and a growing sense of unease. I spent that first night reading the rules, each one more bizarre than the last. Some seemed nonsensical, others terrifying in their specificity, but it was the handwritten notes in the margins that truly frightened me. Desperate warnings and observations from previous operators, some entries ending mid-sentence. The booth itself was small, maybe 8 by 8 feet, with windows on all sides. The glass was thick with hairline cracks spreading from the corners like spider webs. The computer looked like it was from the 1990s, its green text glowing in the darkness. A single fluorescent light flickered overhead, creating moving shadows that seemed to dance across the walls. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the first car pulled up. My hands shook as I remembered Rule 1, time to find out if Tom was crazy or if I'd made a terrible mistake taking this job. The window rolled down, and I learned that some rules are written in blood for a reason. That first car changed everything. A red Camry, its paint so dark it looked like fresh blood under the toll booth lights. The woman inside wore a black veil, which should have been my first warning. But I was new, nervous, and I made the mistake of looking directly at her, breaking Rule 3. "Hello, Daniel James Morrison," she said, using my full name. Rule 5 flashed through my mind. Never respond if someone calls you by your full name. My mouth went dry as I remembered Tom's warning. I stayed silent, hand outstretched for the toll. She smiled then, at least, I think it was a smile. Her teeth seemed wrong somehow, too numerous and sharp. She dropped 3 quarters into my palm, each one burning cold against my skin. "No change needed, dear, but you might want to check those dates." My stomach dropped as I examined the coins. 1962, 1959, 1963. Rule 4. If someone pays with coins dated before 1964, close booth immediately. The woman's smile widened impossibly as I slammed the window shut and pulled down the metal security gate. Through the glass, I could see her face beginning to shift. The skin rippled like water, eyes multiplying across her forehead. I squeezed my eyes shut, clutching Tom's medallion until my knuckles turned white. When I looked again, the Camry was gone, but the coins remained on my counter, impossibly cold. That was my introduction to the rules. Here they are, as written in the handbook, with my observations. Rule 1. Never give change between 11:47 p.m. and 3:33 a.m. The previous operator wrote beside this, "They collect more than money during these hours. I've seen what happens when this rule is broken." Poor bastard in booth 17 made change at 2:15 a.m. They found his booth empty, coins scattered across the floor, each one stamped with his screaming face. Rule 2. If a black SUV with tinted windows stops, only accept exact payment. Don't mention the child in the back seat. There is no child. The SUV comes every Thursday at 1:13 a.m. I've learned not to look at the window reflections. Rule 3. Don't look directly at passengers in red vehicles. Red isn't always paint. Some nights, the vehicles leave crimson trails on the asphalt that disappear by morning. Rule 4. If someone pays with coins dated before 1964, close booth immediately. Silver repels them. They're trying to eliminate our protection. The older operators keep bags of pre-1964 coins for emergencies. Rule 5. Never respond if someone calls you by your full name. Names have power. They're collecting them. The logbook has a list of missing operators. All disappeared after breaking this rule. Rule 6. If the computer screen shows error 404, pretend to process the transaction normally. The void is watching through the screen. Sometimes I see faces in the static, mouthing words I don't want to understand. Rule 7. Keep Saint Medallion from supervisor in booth at all times. It's not the saint that protects us. Check the symbols on the back. The medallion vibrates when certain vehicles approach. I've started logging which ones. But these weren't all the rules. New ones appeared in the handbook every week, written in fresh ink that sometimes dripped onto my desk. Rule 13. If a motorcycle stops with no rider, process the payment for 2 vehicles. Rule 17. Don't acknowledge the walking figures in the breakdown lane. Rule 22. When the mile markers count backward, switch to manual processing. Rule 28. If someone offers payment in paper bills with invalid precedents, burn them immediately. I learned each rule's importance the hard way. The night shift showed me horrors that made me question reality itself. But nothing prepared me for what happened during my first week when I discovered why no one ever saw the day shift operators. They didn't exist. The day shift was a lie, but that wasn't the strangest thing I discovered during my first week. Each night brought new horrors to booth 23. Wednesday night, the ceiling started weeping. Not water, something darker, thicker. It formed patterns on the floor that looked like words in a language that hurt my eyes. I tried radioing the other booths, but only got static and what sounded like backwards singing. The security cameras caught things my eyes couldn't process. At 2:17 a.m., I watched a figure walking against traffic, its legs bending backward. Cars passed through it like smoke. When it turned to face the camera, the feed cut out. The timestamp flickered between 2:17 a.m. and 7:17 a.m. before settling on time not found. Thursday brought the phone calls. Our booth had an old landline for emergencies, its cord frayed and yellowed. It hadn't worked in years according to the logbook, but at 11:47 p.m. it rang. Booth 23, how can I? Daniel, it was my voice on the other end. Don't trust next Tuesday's version of us. We let them in. We let them. The line crackled with static before my voice returned, overlapped with others. The coins, count the coins, they're breeding in the cash drawer. I slammed the phone down, but it kept ringing. Each time, it was my voice from different nights, different timelines, different booths. Some were screaming, some were laughing, some spoke in languages that made my nose bleed. Friday, I discovered why we never saw other operators. The radio would crackle to life with their voices, passing along warnings and updates. Booth 17 to all stations. They're changing the rules again. The handbook's bleeding. Booth 44, reporting multiple quantum violations. Reality integrity at 47%. Booth, help. They found a way through the coins. But when I looked out across the highway, all the other booths were dark, empty. Some looked abandoned for years, ivy growing through broken windows. Yet the voices continued, crossing time and space through crackling radio waves. Saturday night, she came back. The woman in the red Camry, but this time, she wasn't alone. Your predecessor wants to say hello, Daniel James Morrison. Tom sat in the passenger seat, his skin gray, eyes clouded. His mouth moved wrong as he spoke. I tried to warn you. The rules, they're not for us. We're not the ones being protected. His face began to melt, revealing something underneath that wasn't bone. They're containing us. We're the threat. We've always been. The woman placed a hand on his shoulder and Tom dissolved into a pile of pre-1,964 coins. He never could follow Rule 5, she smiled. Would you like your change? I shook my head, clutching the medallion. The symbols on its back were glowing now, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. Wise choice, but Tuesday is coming, Daniel James Morrison. Time to decide which side of the toll booth you really serve. As she drove away, I noticed something in the cash drawer. The coins from her first visit were gone. In their place was a new rule, written in fresh ink that smelled like copper. Rule 29, when Tuesday comes, choose wisely. The booth isn't a barrier, it's a door. And Tuesday was coming, but first, I had to survive the night the black SUV finally stopped at my booth. It came during the worst storm I'd ever seen. Rain fell upward, lightning flashed black instead of white. Each thundercrack sounded like something massive trying to break through the sky. 11:47 p.m. The computer started glitching, green text scrambling into patterns that looked like screaming faces. The medallion on my desk vibrated so violently it dented the metal counter. Then the headlights appeared. Rule 2 pounded in my head. If a black SUV with tinted windows stops, only accept exact payment. But the handbook never mentioned what to do when the SUV was dripping shadows, leaving pools of darkness that crawled across the pavement like living things. The vehicle stopped perfectly centered at my window. The paint seemed to absorb all light, creating a void in the shape of a car. My booth's fluorescent light flickered and died, leaving only the sickly green glow of the computer screen. The driver's window lowered with a sound like tearing flesh. The man inside wore a pristine business suit from another era. Where his face should have been, I saw only a suggestion of features, like an unfinished painting. Toll for 2, he said, voice resonating at frequencies that made my teeth ache. $3, I managed to whisper, trying not to look at the back seat. Rule 2's margin note echoed in my mind. Don't mention the child in the back seat. There is no child. But I could hear it singing. The man extended his hand. His fingers were too long, too numerous, shifting and multiplying as he held out the payment. 3 coins, their surfaces crawling with tiny symbols that rearranged themselves continuously. Exact change, he said. The air temperature dropped so low I could see my breath crystallizing into symbols matching those on the coins. I knew I shouldn't touch them, knew they weren't really coins, but Rule 2 demanded I accept exact payment. As my fingers closed around the metal, vision slammed into my mind. The true purpose of the toll booths. The ancient deal made with things that lived in the spaces between seconds. Why the highway never appeared on any maps. What really happened to all those missing operators? Why Tuesday was so important? The man's non-face rippled. You see now, don't you? Why you were chosen. What lives inside your medallion. From the back seat, the singing grew louder. The child that wasn't there was calling my name, my full name. I wanted to scream, but Rule 5 kept my mouth shut. Instead, I dropped the coins into the drawer. They burned through the metal, leaving perfect holes in the shape of my eyes. Your booth faces east, the man said. When Tuesday comes, make sure it faces west. The doors only open one way. The SUV pulled away, trailing darkness like oil. Where it had stopped, symbols were carved into the asphalt. The same ones from the medallion, but inverted. In the cash drawer, I found a new rule written in chrome. Rule 30, East is for endings, West is for what comes after endings. I spent the rest of the shift watching those symbols sink deeper into the road, wondering how many other operators had failed to correctly count the seats in the black SUV. There were always 4 seats visible, but the singing came from a 5th. The weekend shift was covered by Marcus. At least that's what he called himself the first time I met him during shift change. Each night he looked different, older, more hollow. Watch the mile markers he warned me Sunday night, his skin hanging loose like ill-fitting clothes. They're moving closer together, compressing space. He was right. Mile 23 and mile 24 were now only 20 feet apart. In between, reality looked stretched thin, like worn fabric. Cars passing through that stretch came out different, changed. The missing persons report started appearing on my computer screen between transactions. Missing, Sarah Chen, last seen mile marker 23, status, found in mile marker 24, age 78, note, disappeared, age 25, time displacement 53 years. Missing, David Cooper, last seen mile marker 47, status, partial recovery, note, only memories returned. Missing, Marcus Webb, last seen booth 23, status, still employed, note, paradox warning, subject exists in multiple states. That last one made my blood freeze. Marcus Webb, my weekend replacement. Each shift change was a new iteration of him, being worn away by something that lived in the space between days. The maintenance crew arrived at 3:33 am Monday morning. Their truck had no wheels, hovering 6 inches above the road. They wore uniforms made of static and carried tools that cast no shadows. Annual inspection, their foreman said through too many mouths. Keep processing tolls. They opened panels in the booth's walls that hadn't existed before. Inside, I glimpsed machinery that predated time, gears turning in impossible directions, powered by something that looked like frozen lightning. One worker pulled out a logbook covered in skin, human skin. Pages fluttered open to reveal entries from every operator who'd ever staffed booth 23. 1967, they're using the tollway to cross over. 1982, found out what the coins are made from, God help us. 1995, it's not about the money, it's about maintaining the barrier. 2018, Tom here, if you're reading this, I failed, check the medallion's core. 2025, this is Marcus, all of us, time is breaking down. The last entry was in my handwriting, dated next Tuesday. I understand now. We're not collecting tolls, we're collecting sacrifices. The maintenance crew sealed the panels, taking decades of dust with them, but they left something behind. A small key made of bone, carved with a warning. For Tuesday, some doors should remain locked. That night, I finally looked inside the medallion. It split open like a silver egg, revealing a tiny booth made of light. Inside, an operator was eternally accepting payment from a car that never finished passing through. Time was a toll road, and something wanted to stop paying the fare. Tuesday was approaching, and reality was breaking down. The computer screen showed impossible data. Vehicles processed, tolls collected, time until convergence, -7 hours reality, integrity, 13% barrier status, failing. Old newspapers materialized in my drawer, headlines shifting as I read them. Blackwood Turnpike opens. 7 disappear during ceremony, 1947. Toll booth massacre, operators found transformed. 1956. Highway to nowhere, investigation reveals impossible geography. 1973. Mass temporal displacement event. Turnpike closed. 1989. Road still operational. No employees found. 2024. The last one's date kept changing, showing years that hadn't happened yet. At 11:47 p.m., every rule in the handbook activated simultaneously. Red cars lined up endlessly, each driver calling my full name. The black SUV circled the booth, multiplying with each lap. Pre-1,964 coins rained upward from the asphalt. The radio crackled. This is Marcus. All of us. The barriers are failing. They're using our own rules against us. I watched through the cameras as other booths twisted in impossible ways. Booth 17 folded into itself like origami made of reality. Booth 44 expanded infinitely, containing universes. Booth 32 never existed, but I remembered working there for decades. The medallion burned white hot, its miniature scene playing faster. The eternal operator was changing, becoming me, becoming Marcus, becoming something else. Then I found the hidden message behind Rule 29. The booth isn't a barrier, it's a door. The bone key felt alive in my pocket. Through the windows, I saw what the turnpike really was. A wound in reality's skin, hastily stitched shut with roads and rules and human lives. We weren't collecting tolls. We were maintaining the sutures. And something wanted to tear them open. The woman in the red Camry pulled up, Tom's coins spilling from her exhaust pipe. Time to choose Daniel James Morrison. The door swings both ways now. Behind her, the black SUV idled, its backseat now visibly containing what was never there, a child made of static and starlight, singing in frequencies that made reality bleed. The maintenance crew's truck hovered nearby, tools ready to repair the cosmic wound or tear it wider. My computer flashed one final message. Tuesday has always been here, door status, unlocked waiting for operator decision. The bone key grew warmer as everything I'd learned clicked into place. The rules weren't for our protection. They were parameters, variables in an equation that kept existence functioning. And I finally understood what the turnpike really connected. The truth was written in the spaces between rules, in the static between radio transmissions, in the endless iterations of Marcus. The Blackwood Turnpike wasn't a road, it was a border between dimensions, a tollway between realities. Every coin collected was a token, a small payment to keep our universe separate from the others pressing against it. The rules were a containment protocol. Each booth was a checkpoint, each operator a guardian. We weren't collecting money, we were collecting proof of existence, small pieces of reality that proved our dimension was still valid. But some things wanted to cross over without paying. The woman in the red Camry was a scout, testing our defenses. The black SUV was a transport, smuggling fragments of other dimensions through the barriers. The child in the non-existent fifth seat, a key to unlock everything. The maintenance crew weren't repairmen. They were the original architects, the ones who built the turnpike when reality first started leaking. Their tools didn't fix the booths, they fixed the fabric of existence. Tom knew. That's why he gave me the medallion. It wasn't just a protection charm, it was a miniature model of the entire system. The trapped operator inside was a battery, powering the barriers with endless iterations of collected tolls. The missing operators weren't missing, they were fuel. Each one who learned too much, who broke too many rules, was converted into energy to maintain the barriers. Their memories became coins, their experiences became rules, their lives became power. Marcus wasn't one person changing over time. He was hundreds of operators collapsed into a single point of existence, endlessly repeating their shifts until they wore away into nothing. And Tuesday wasn't a day, it was an event, a convergence point where all possible realities would align, where the barriers would be at their weakest. The day when everything we'd been preventing would finally have a chance to break through. The bone key was made from the first operator, the one who wrote the original rules. It could lock the barriers forever or open them completely. As the truth settled into my mind, the radio crackled one last time. It was my own voice from a Tuesday that hadn't happened yet. The collectors are coming. They're not here for the tolls anymore. They're here for the keys. Through my booth's windows, I watched reality ripple. Mile markers collapsed into singularities. Cars passed through each other, their drivers simultaneously alive and dead, here and there, paying tolls with coins that existed in all possible states. The final choice was approaching, and in my pocket, the bone key started to sing. Tuesday arrived during a solar eclipse that shouldn't have been possible. The sun and moon occupied the same space, casting shadows that moved like living things. All rules activated simultaneously. Red cars lined every lane, their drivers speaking in my voice. The black SUV multiplied infinitely, each one carrying a different version of the singing child. Pre-1964 coins fell upward like metallic rain. Every computer screen showed error 404, faces swimming in the static. The mile markers spun like slot machines. The medallion cracked open, releasing the trapped operator. Phone lines screamed with the voices of every missing toll collector. The woman in the red Camry pulled up to my window one last time. Her face had settled into its true form, a swirling vortex of possibilities. Last chance to choose Daniel James Morrison. The collectors are here. They emerged from between seconds, massive geometries of light and darkness, older than time, hungry for passage. The original toll collectors coming to reclaim their highway. The bone key vibrated in my hand, responding to their presence. I understood my options. Use the key to 1. Lock the barriers forever, sealing off our reality but trapping everyone currently caught between dimensions. 2. Open everything, allowing free passage between all realities but risking total universal collapse. 3. Something else, something that no operator had ever tried. The maintenance cruise truck hovered nearby, tools radiating impossible energy. The child in the SUV sang a melody that made mathematics cry. Marcus, in all his iterations, watched from every booth simultaneously. I made my choice. I used the key, not on a door or a barrier, but on the medallion itself. The trapped operator emerged. But it wasn't just one person. It was every operator who had ever worked the turnpike, their collected experiences and knowledge intact. We became something new, not quite human, not quite other, a living toll booth, a conscious barrier between realities. The collectors recoiled. This wasn't in the rules. This wasn't part of the ancient agreement. We spoke with the voice of every operator who had ever accepted a toll. New management, new rules. Reality reshuffled itself around us. The turnpike became a true border crossing, with fair passage for those who deserved it. The collectors became our employees, bound by rules they had once enforced. Tom appeared beside me, solid once more. So that's what Rule 31 meant. I looked at him, confused. There was no Rule 31. He smiled. There is now. You wrote it. I looked down at the handbook. There, in my handwriting, Rule 31. Sometimes the best way to enforce the rules is to become them. The sun and moon separated. The red Camry drove away for the last time. The black SUV's child stopped singing, finally at peace. I still work at booth 23. We all do. Every operator who ever was or will be, maintaining the barriers between realities. The rules are different now, but they still exist. They have to. After all, something has to keep the highway running. Just check your change carefully, and if you see a toll booth during an impossible eclipse, remember, we're not collecting money, we're collecting possibilities.